Hello friends, there comes a time in every fighter's life where you're trying to canoe up a fast-moving river with no paddle and no canoe. We call this Gradelock. Gradelock comes with three major disadvantages. The first disadvantage is that you have a lower base power vanguard, which makes it both harder to hit your opponent and harder to guard for yourself. The second is not being able to utilize most of the cards in your hand that are of a higher grade than the grade you're stuck at, and this includes guarding with grade 2s when stuck at 0. The third disadvantage is that you lose out on the net card advantage from your opponent getting twin drive and you not having it. This applies not just to getting that extra card in the drive check, but also not being able to plausibly hit more than one trigger, which reduces how much shield you can force. Being Gradelock does have one very slight advantage, even though it's temporary. Since you aren't riding, you do have that one extra card in your hand that would have otherwise been used for that ride. While this example video isn't the worst Gradelock I've come back from, and my hand was pretty decent in spite of my Gradelock, I would like to explain some of my decisions after the turn 1 bum rush. Other than calling out those grade 1s to do a standard turn 1 rush, you should also call out triggers if you're lacking in field presence. And if you aren't up against a deck with a massive amount of critical pressure, or otherwise losing horribly early, you should probably also call out your null guards. And you might be thinking, Tim, that's way too manly for my pansy-ass self. That's okay, man. I didn't like the thought of it at first either. Then after doing it a few times in friendly games while screaming, MAN MODE! At the top of my lungs, then finding out that I win more games that way, it just works. The rationale behind this is that if you boost with or attack with a trigger twice, then it's forced out shield equivalent to its own. If they didn't actually guard for this to be true, then your trigger very likely secured that hit for you. Calling triggers when you're lacking in field presence also lets your grade 1 and 2s hit over the base value of an opponent's vanguard, so your 10k and 8k vanillas can still hit over those 11 or 13k vanguards by boosting or being boosted by a trigger. While triggers don't usually scale super well into late game, you can still end up making some pretty solid rows if you have them boosting 11 or 12k attackers, and you can still force out 10k shield on most vanguards. Additionally, many decks can utilize, sacrifice, or get something from calling their triggers in other ways. Here are a few examples. Psychic Bird and Rough Seas Banshee can be played early, then move to Soul for a net 0 later. This is one of the key rush tactics for Tom and Jerry. Great Nature triggers can be buffed to be between 7 and 9,000 power from a single dope. Ruler Chameleon can also counterblast one and search for another copy of himself for a net 0. Mass Production Sailor gets progressively stronger for every other copy of himself on the field, so playing more of him isn't really an issue. The Drive Quartet of Bermuda Triangle becomes 7k if their respective member is on the field. Margle clones can move to the Soul for a power up to 1 unit on the field. Narukami and Dark Irregulars can move a trigger to the Soul to force a retirement. And there are also a plethora of other units that can move to the Soul for other effects like Shirley, Red Lightning. And there's also other units that can sacrifice the triggers that are already on the field like Deadly Nightmare and Raging Form Dragon. And this is not to say that you can't just call a trigger and leave it there, or call over it later. As you were able to see over the course of this game, my hitting a few early triggers was able to help secure my large advantage in spite of my Gradelock. My opponent was also trying to bide his units for an all-in final turn push by retiring multiple units and swinging with 2 Rochi Sheen for 2 turns in a row. He didn't actually call his Rochi Sheen because he knew that I was Gradelocked and I would have to swing into them because hitting his Vanguard would be really hard. So I was able to be at 0 damage when he rode to grade 3 by dropping a single 10k shield. Because I got a little bit lucky with those triggers, he had to guard with his Rochi Sheen or else he was going to lose, and this secured my defenses even more since those cards never got to be utilized offensively. The ultimate point of this video is that if you're Gradelocked, you need to rush if you don't have the grade that you need anywhere in sight. By calling a trigger that could easily be the best unit for that rearguard slot for 3 or more turns, you get enough offensive value out of it to more than make up for the defensive value that you lose. This is really important because in a battle of resources where you aren't attacking for very much or with many units, dropping a 10k shield will stop one attack for 1 damage one time. That's it. But calling that trigger could secure 2 or more damage or force out 10k or more shield over the course of the game. If you let them play the resource game where they're also holding onto their shield, you end up losing by default in almost all cases, especially if you're Gradelocked for more than 1 turn. This is why rushing and trigger calling is the best case choice in most Gradelock scenarios where a trigger would be the best booster or attacker for that particular rearguard circle. In closing, I would like to say, yeah, I only called 1 trigger. And I kind of said that this video wasn't the best example because my hand was already built to rush. This was just to show you how powerful Gradelocked rushing can be and how it can turn a hopeless game into a win.